Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. In this video, we will be discussing the archaeology of what did they think? Cognitive archaeology. This is a review of the Renfro and Vaughan Chapter 9, Archaeology Essentials. In cognitive archaeology, archaeologists study symbols and try to track human behaviors in a way that can allow us to at least speculate about what it is that they were thinking in their minds, hence the term cognitive archaeology. Modern humans, fully modern Homo sapiens, have the ability to use symbols, and this clearly distinguishes us from other early hominids, although as you'll see, there is a little bit of evidence going back before modern humans of some forms of symbolic use of etchings and maybe some red ochre use, but it's extremely rare. Only with our species, Homo sapiens, do we really start to see the fluorescence of symbolic use in the form of art and engravings, statues, and ultimately writing. Really, any object or any drawing or painting on different kinds of surfaces that really can be unhesitatingly recognized as a depiction of something. That is a representation of an object in the real world. Only these are considered true symbols. Words and language are symbols. Our alphabet, our sounds have meaning, and therefore they symbolize something. Here you can see a petroglyph, which is attributed to the classic vernal style of the Fremont culture in eastern Utah, very clearly etched into a desert varnish wall, symbolism, this form of art. In cognitive archaeology, we're looking for the manufacture of, we're looking for evidence that can really pertain to cognitive ability and cognitive function. So in some cases, stone tools, if we study the manufacture process of stone tools and of some other artifacts, these can tell us quite a lot about cognitive ability. The production of rock paintings, stone tools, pots or ceramics, bronze artifacts, all of these require complicated and standardized manufacturing processes, require stages of development, and that lets us understand the cognitive abilities, the forward thinking and planning ahead that modern humans had. Here's another example of rock art painted, paintings of anthropomorphic figurines and dots. This comes from the Italian Western Alps. So we can begin by talking really about the origins of our self-consciousness. These have really been debated by philosophers, but there's really few definitive conclusions. Like, when did we really become self-aware of ourselves as individuals? When, as a species, were we able to think of ourselves as unique among the species and also to be empathetic with our other fellow humans and species? So there's evidence of caring for the sick and wounded can help us understand the development of empathy. We know that Neanderthals did this to some degree. Maybe even earlier hominids helped their own when they were wounded or unable to fend for themselves. So this has a long lineage in hominids. But when we get into fully modern humans, like this Mesolithic burial here, we start to see the use of items of personal adornment, jewelry, wearing of beads, and burials, extensive burials with lots of grave goods of different kinds. This begins during the Upper Paleolithic period and lasts from that point forward, where we have many well-established cases of human burials where they're deliberately laid to rest in a hole that was dug and thought out. Sometimes they're accompanied by ornaments of personal adornment, jewelry. shells, cowrie shells, in this case, reindeer antlers, and so on. The items of adornment or the jewelry imply that these are objects of decoration and that they enhance the individual's appearance. They make them beautiful, or they otherwise yell out, "Look at me, I'm an individual among you." So it could be prestige, or it could indicate any number of other social factors, but we all wear jewelry. Some of us have tattoos. Many of you wear makeup. Think about why it is that this is so, and when did that behavior really begin? I will add that modern humans were not the first hominids to bury their dead. We know that Neanderthals in Europe occasionally buried their dead, not very often in the grand scheme of things. And when they did, they simply dug a hole and kind of haphazardly shoved the body into that hole and then buried them up. There's very little evidence of burial goods with Neanderthals at all. It may have been simply just a way of disposing of the body. We don't start to see burial items, material artifacts that are placed in with the deceased until fully modern humans during the Upper Paleolithic. At Sungir in Russia, there are about 10 individuals buried in this part of Russia. Sungir dates to about 34,000 years old and goes for some thousand years after that. These are very elaborate burials at a very early age during the middle of the Upper Paleolithic. Here on the right, you see two boys aged 9 to 10 years old, and then one is an adolescent from 12 to 13 years old. It's among the richest of the burials of the group at Sungir. They have a lot of mammoth ivory beads and ivory and other items. Ivory was worth quite a lot during the Paleolithic. It was an exceptional material to make tools, but also these people probably were engaged in mammoth hunting at that time. These two boys likely had debilitating conditions that impacted their lives and may have ended them early. That may be why they died at such a young age. They're buried head to head with a variety of these pendants and bracelets and other items of adornment, ornaments and decoration. The graves are covered in red ochre. They probably were wearing their best clothing, which had ivory beads attached to them. One of them wore a belt of fox teeth, and then the use of red ochre to cover these. On the left, you see another burial of an adult, similar style, lots of red ochre, lots of beads. How far back in time does symbolic behavior occur? There is this case of an etched mussel shell from Chenil at Java that dates to about 430,000 years ago. And if you look at this image closely, you'll see zigzag line etched into the shell. It's potentially the earliest evidence of what we might call graphic art or an attempt at art. And it would have been done by Homo erectus, who was in Indonesia at this time. These are extremely rare examples, though, as we had mentioned before, and nothing like the Sungir Upper Paleolithic burials that we just discussed occurred this long ago. Here's an engraved piece of red ochre from Blombos Cave in South Africa. It's, aside from the example of the etched mussel shell, it's one of the oldest known items with an etched symbolic representation on it. And we know that red ochre was important to early Homo sapiens as a burial item. When you mix it with fat and water, it makes this flowing red, bright red paint that resembles blood. And blood may be symbolic of life. This particular item of red ochre with engravings on the side dates to about 77,000 years ago in South Africa and is among one of the earliest examples of modern humans using ochre and expressing themselves artistically. Paleolithic cave art, especially from France and Spain, has an extraordinary history within the discipline of archaeology. Here you can see the sequence of discoveries of what are some of the most exceptional examples of Upper Paleolithic cave art in Europe. Lascaux Cave was found in 1940, Koskar Cave in 1985, Chavut Cave in 1994, and Cossack Cave in 2000. Each of these caves represent hundreds of animals and paintings. Well, Cossack Cave has etchings of woolly mammoth, etc. But you can see the really exceptional artistic expression of what is primarily Upper Paleolithic game animals like woolly rhinoceros, Pleistocene horse, in many cases woolly mammoth, cave lions, and a number of other megafauna that existed during the last ice age, during the Pleistocene. Exceptionally well preserved in these dark environments. Here are some of the primary locations. You can see most of them occur in southwestern France and then in the caves throughout the Pyrenees along the border with Spain. The principal locations of these Paleolithic rock art sites. Some of them are very hard to get to with their passages now underwater and others where rockfalls had obscured them. So they're not easily found all of the time. Just because they were open caves 30,000 years ago doesn't mean they're really accessible today. Most of these date between 35,000 and 10,000 years ago. Here's an example from Lascaux Cave at 17,000 years old, a mural with a really menagerie of different animals, including auroch and Pleistocene horse here. There are some reindeer as well. They often use the surface of the cave to highlight and accentuate the art. These are true artistic masterpieces. Here's an example from Koskor Cave, 27,000 to 19,000 years ago, with some excellent Pleistocene horse examples drawn with charcoal on the wall. Another charcoal drawing from Chavut Cave, 32,000 to 30,000 years old, one of the oldest examples of this. Here you have a whole range of different woolly rhinoceros. And if you imagine being in one of these caves with a torch flickering and the different angles and surface of the cave, which is not smooth, the flickering of those torches or fires would really make these animals come alive and make them appear as if they're moving across this landscape. More examples from really the extraordinary Chavut Cave, dated 32,000 to 30,000 years ago. You can see the different horses, almost looks like they're in motion. And in the panel of cave lions here, really kind of exceptional pieces of art. Here's some etchings, examples of etchings, 25,000 years old, mammoth and horse etchings from Cossack Cave. Not all the art was on walls. Some of it was portable or mobiliary art that you could carry with you. Some examples from the Cave La Vache in France at 14,000 years old have engravings of 3 lions on this bone here, and there's a close-up of one of the lion faces. Other examples of portable Paleolithic art from the Cave La Garma, 14,800 years old, found in Spain in 1991. One of these on the right is a palette knife with some animal figurine motif ahead. Perhaps it's representing a horse carved into this bone knife, and then an engraved reindeer head here on the left. Other forms of Paleolithic portable art that's more famous include what we would call Venus figurine. This is one on mammoth ivory, dated 20,000 to 14,000 years old, from the open air site, meaning it's not a cave, at Zareysk near Moscow in Russia. This one was found in 2005. There are many examples of the Venus figurines. They're not all voluptuous or large or obese like this one represents. Some of them are skinny. There's a wide variety of styles of Venus figurines, but they spread all over Europe and are even found far out into Siberia. So whatever they represent, whatever the people were thinking, it is a widespread phenomenon that appears to stretch across the Mammoth Steppe. This is a Venus figurine on yellow soapstone, 24,000 years old, from the Balzi Rosi caves in Grimaldi in northern Italy, one of many from this area, and these were found in the late 19th century. Here you can see a wide variety of different examples from the Balzi Rossi caves at Grimaldi in northern Italy, all the different varieties of different types of Venus figurines that have been found just at that one site. Probably the most famous is the Venus of Willendorf at 28,000 years old. It was carved on limestone and found in Lower Austria in 1908. And if you're viewing the PDF notes version of this lecture, you can click the 3D model link online and view the digital 3D scan of this from the Natural History Museum in Vienna, Austria. It's really an exceptional piece that I was fortunate enough to visit just last year, and it's an exceptional representation of portable Paleolithic art. So symbols are really important in terms of artistic expression. They're used by people for a wide variety of reasons. They are used to regulate and organize people and social groups and categories. They depict social status, and they convey messages to large groups of people, and also they represent a variety of different things. Some of these can be recognized in the archaeological record to help us determine what it is people were thinking, or to speculate at best on an educated guess how people were thinking at the time. Symbols are sometimes used to mark places like addresses, or to define territories as in signs. They are used in the construction of systems of measurement, as we'll see soon. They're used to design and map and plan villages and communities and settlements in some cases. In other cases, there is no planning of settlements. It's haphazardly built. But symbols shape and reflect our social realities. They reflect our identity and power relationships among ourselves. Symbols allow people to communicate with the supernatural powers of religion. For example, the spirit world. Symbols allow us to develop units of measurement, which is a fundamental cognitive step. This helps set up and establish methods of our economies and our exchange and trade. The use of symbols represent all of these different things. So the archaeology of religion and cult behavior is another aspect of examining human cognitive development through time. The temple of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is an example of cult activity very early on at 12 to 10,000 years ago. It has the earliest known temple altar that we have found. Here's a representation on its pillars of a wild boar and other animals that are carved into these pillars at Göbekli Tepe. It's a large temple in southwestern Turkey. Very, very early example of a temple or an altar. Writing implies a major extension of human cognitive abilities. Written symbols have proved the most effective system ever devised by humans for communicating. If you think about it, you can write things down, and as long as people can understand or decode the symbolism of the language, you can communicate through thousands of years with other people. So writing is used to describe the world around you. It's used to communicate and control people. Writing is used to organize society as a whole. And written items pass on to posterity the accumulated knowledge of society in our books. Books outlast their authors, and people can read them through the generations. Here you see an example of a Mesopotamian clay tablet with a proto-cuneiform pictographic set of characters. This is pre-cuneiform, and it dates 4000 to 3100 BC to the Uruk III period, some of the earliest known writing in the world. Large ceremonial centers become important here on the island of Orkney and off the north coast of Scotland. You have a ritual landscape in which individuals lived and participated and engaged with their land around them. Here's a map of the Ring of Brodgar, which is one element of a complex and rich sacred landscape. You can see part of it here in the picture. This demonstrates that it was not only large, organized state societies that were capable of creating monumental public works or erecting these megalithic features like Stonehenge. These were Neolithic ceremonial centers before state-level complex societies existed in the area. Symbols allow us to create standard units of measurement, like in Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan among the Harappan or Indus civilization, dated 3,300 to about 1,300 BC. Units of weight, like in this case stone cubes, typically of carnelian or other semi-precious stones, were used at Mohenjo-Daro and other Indus or Harappan cities and villages as a standard unit of mass. It produced in multiples of 0.836 grams or about 0.03 ounces. That's how accurate their measurements were. They had scale pans and scales, balanced scales that indicate the standard use of measurement. Their economy was based on this. Also among the Indus, they planned their cities and streets from their cities down to their villages. There's regularity in the layout of an Indus city and village. Here's an example from Mohenjo-Daro, where the main streets are roughly at right angles, and it shows a conscious town planning in advance, a layout, almost a zoning layout of this is how a city should be built. And they had a mental template of this because many of their cities followed similar plans, and even many of their smaller towns and villages followed somewhat similar concepts. In other situations, say at Chateau Hoyuk village here in Turkey, dated older, 7100 to 5700 BC, one of the first and earliest Neolithic villages to emerge in the area, there doesn't appear to be any conscious planning at all. In fact, there are no real roads. There's some courts in there, but rectangular apartments are kind of crammed together, and you have to access them through the roof. So it's kind of inconvenient. It resembles something of a beehive, which are just sort of haphazardly built around without any kind of forethought that went into it in advance. Another example of structural planning in advance here is a passage in a chamber from Newgrange in Ireland, where the deliberate alignment to the sun's rays brings sunlight from the midwinter sun directly into the back end of the chamber during specific times. So this had to be planned out in advance with astrological knowledge in advance of construction. This Maya lintel number 24 from Yahachilan dates from 723 to 726 AD. We know that because we can read the date, which is stamped here in the top left. The exact date is October 25th AD 709, apparently, which roughly translates into a different year than we have on the slide. I apologize for that. This is about AD 709. It's a limestone carving depicting a Mayan shield, Jaguar III, and his wife. Jaguar III, the ritual god, and his wife, Lady Kaabal Hook, during a sacred ritual that's depicted here. And the glyphs give us details of the names of the people, their titles, the calendar date, and the description of the rite that's taking place. You can see here the specific glyphs that tell us this in the Maya script was decoded in the 1980s, so we can read these. The golden burial at Varna in Bulgaria, the Varna necropolis, where there's a range of different burials dating back to 4000 BC, 6,000 years old. Some of the oldest known gold jewelry used in Europe. It helps us deduce the scale of value of something. The value of gold to the people of Varna is suggested by these burials, where it's used to decorate significant parts of the body. You can see that this person was buried with a cloak that was covered in all these gold buttons. He's got a large gold plate over his solar plexus, which would have been an important part of the body, and these gold bagels or bracelets around his arms. You'll also notice that here he has, this person is buried with a gold penis sheath. So it emphasizes either or both the value of the gold or the relative value of the body part to the people of Varna at 6,000 years ago. U-shaped platforms at Chavin in Peru, 900 to 200 BC. These U-shaped platforms are in temples that surround a sunken plaza. There's a central passageway to the narrow chamber, which is dominated by the Lanzan, or the great image at the end of the chamber. So excellent representation of early temples here in South America and the artistic expression of the Chavin people. Outside of the temple, there's sculptures that show the transformation of a shaman into a jaguar, transformation of a masked shaman here on the bottom. He changes into a jaguar on the top. And these sculptures are displayed on the outer wall of the Lanzan temple. They hint at drug-induced rituals that cause hallucinations and allow a religious practitioner or a shaman to really enter the spirit world, or to transmorph from a human body into the body of a jaguar, the spirit of a jaguar. Very, very powerful religion representations. Here you can see the earliest writing systems around the world. Zapotec around 600 BC. The Maya hieroglyphs emerge around 350 BC. There is an Easter Island script that shows up at 1500 AD. Some of the earlier forms of writing, Mesopotamia, we see cuneiform at 3100 BC, or 5,100 years ago, just before Egyptian hieroglyphics emerge at 3000 BC. We see the ancestral Phoenician alphabet at around 1000 BC. And over in China, Chinese characters begin to emerge around 1200 BC or earlier than that. The Indus alphabet and the Brahmi alphabet emerges around 350 BC, while the Indus Valley script, which we saw examples of, dates to about 2500 BC. So some of the earliest writing in the world really comes from Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and Egypt, as something to consider. And writing really is like the fundamental invention of the human species, a symbolic form of codifying our words and our thoughts, our languages, into a permanent record that can be passed down generation after generation. Writing was such a powerful invention by humans that fostered the development of state-level societies in many cases. So in conclusion here in this video, we've talked about cognitive archaeology and ways that we can understand and get into how people were thinking, what they were planning. In some cases, we might be able to speculate about religious activities, all from the earliest forms of symbolic behavior, like when did it begin among our ancestors? Was there any widespread use? In which case, archaeologically, we can say there was not. Really is the Upper Paleolithic when we start to see burials and art on cave walls and portable art that we see fully modern humans have this symbolic revolution in cognitive abilities and behaviors. Really does set us apart from our ancestors. Use of symbols and the rise of ceremonial centers. We've seen the standard units of measurement and mass in the Indus Valley and other places. It shows the ability of people to think forward, to plan out things, to take specific steps. They even planned their cities and villages. There's structural planning, and then there's some places where there is no structural planning at all. We have towns and communities that have no zoning laws, and it's a mix of houses and industry and shops without any kind of forethought. There are glyphs and descriptions symbols from the past that we can read. We can speculate about the scale of value, especially of gold and different body parts in the burials from Varna and Bulgaria. And we talked about the earliest forms of writing and its importance to the rise of complex societies and human societies. Quick check of our references. Again, this was a review of Renfro and Vaughn's Chapter 9, Cognitive Archaeology, in the Archaeology Essentials texts. Thank you all for your attention.